You are listening to the Success Leaves Clues podcast,
where we're having conversations with regular people doing outstanding and legacy-changing things in corporate America and entrepreneurship.
If you're looking for the blueprint to help you make less mistakes on your journey to freedom and ultimate purpose, then this is the podcast for you.
And now, here's your host, Dr. K. Dr. K.
I'm lucky to be here today with Jordan Berry. Laundromat Resources is the name of the company, but he is the king of laundromats. I'm going to give him that title simply because he's the only person I know, not only in the laundromat industry, but willing to teach and show others how to do what it is he's doing. Welcome, Jordan.
Hey, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Appreciate that. Unofficial title.
Lighting looks good. I like the blue behind you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, spicing it up. My kid also has a little YouTube channel, gaming YouTube channel. So it doubles for both of us.
Awesome. What type of games?
Minecraft and Roblox, of course.
Okay. Yeah, my son's into the same thing. My youngest son is 12, so he's kind of into that.
Yeah, he's 11.
The same games, yeah.
Yeah.
It's either that or like Fortnite or something, but it's all day gaming.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about laundromats and what got you into the laundromat industry. And the reason I'm so curious is because I grew up lower income and we didn't have, washer and dryer in the house. We had to use laundromats. So one, I know it's a good service, but I never thought of it as a business.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? In the laundromat industry, it doesn't really have a great reputation. I mean, you've been to laundromats, and most people, when they think of laundromats, think of dark, dirty, homeless people. Just not where you want to be spending your time. It's where you have to go, not where you necessarily want to go. But going back to how I got in the business, it's kind of a funny story. So I was a pastor for about 15 years and then was ready to just kind of get a break from that. I had young kids and I was doing traveling and, just a lot of demands on my time and attention. And I was ready to just kind of step back from that full time. And so trying to figure out what to do after that. And we had a little bit of money in the bank and I thought I had this great idea. And my idea was, let's rent out our house. I'm here in Southern California. Let's rent out our house in Southern California and let's head to Hawaii. We'll take the little bit of money that we have saved up and we'll go buy like a house in Hawaii, somewhere close to the beach. We'll go live in Hawaii till our kids are school age. And if we want to, we can come back. And my wife said, or we could buy a laundromat. And so we bought a laundromat instead of moving to Hawaii.
So your wife had the entrepreneurial spirit, or did you have it as well, but she came up with that idea?
Yeah. You know what? It's really fun. So I had never considered business. I don't know. I love doing what I was doing, and never even thought of going that route. And my wife either. My wife's a special ed teacher. But I mean, the thought behind it was, hey, let's go put our money into something that's going to make us money without requiring all of our time. That was the idea behind it. It did not work out that way for us and made a lot of mistakes. I mean, we can talk about that if you want to, but made a lot of mistakes. I spent a lot of days and nights at that laundromat dreaming about being on the beach in Hawaii. And instead, I'm cleaning up after homeless people in the laundromat. So
what gave your wife that idea? Did y'all have some insight into a laundromat? Did you have a friend or something? Like what brought you to laundromat services? Yeah.
So her they had a family friend who, her parents' friend's son, was up in the San Francisco Bay Area and was in the tech industry, and he bought a laundromat. And Allison just kind of heard, my wife Allison just kind of heard rumors about this laundromat, and he ended up quitting his tech job, because the laundromat was doing so well. And I think he ended up buying another one. And so she's like, "Well, yeah, that sounds really, really great. Let's go do that." And So that's where the idea came from. And, the whole thing behind it was, let's bring in some money. We have young kids, but let's bring in some money, but not just require all our time, and that's what we were trying to escape from getting out of the ministry side of things for a little while. But like I mentioned, it didn't go that way for us.
Were you pastoring your own church, or were you like an associate pastor? What was your role in the church?
So I did youth ministry for a long time, and then and then I was associate and college pastor, and all that stuff. So not my own church though. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wore a shirt today. It's I love my church. You
nice.
This contrary to popular belief, I don't wear white every day. It's kind of a uniform for the podcast, but but awesome. So I like to do a lot of youth ministry and stuff too. I'm not a pastor, but I like to serve in any way I can.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think the people who are volunteering in children's ministry, youth ministry, those kinds of things. I mean, those are the people who become their pastors, right? I mean, you're the ones, spending the time with them, investing in them, and that's what's important, I think.
Yeah. So as a pastor, I don't really see that as being something too time consuming, but you said it took you away a lot. Were you doing a lot of travel, evangelist work? I mean, what was taking your time up?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I see where you might get that impression. But I was at a couple bigger churches.
Okay.
And so, there's a lot of demands on your time, not just with kind of regular work activities, but you're dealing with people who have real needs, and a lot of times, people are coming to you when they're at the end of the rope, like they don't know where else to go a lot of times, right? And so you're dealing with real issues that not only are I don't mean this in like a bad way, but time consuming. It just takes a lot of time to sort through people's issues with them and that kind of thing. But it's also just super emotionally draining. And so, I would invest a lot of time and energy into other people and not have as much as I would want at home. And so, and I did do some traveling. I've kind of been all over doing missions work and stuff like that too.
So your wife is a school teacher, but she specializes in helping children with special needs.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I see a little bit of a giving side, not only from yourself, but from your wife and, helping people. And like you said, even her as a school teacher, that can be very draining.
Absolutely.
Y'all did that starting the laundry service to kind of get away and create some time. But do you see a link between, how you and your wife have a giving nature and caring for people transitioning into the laundromat service?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I love about the laundromat business is that it's a very community-centered business, right? It's actually, I would say it's one of the few places, aside from maybe churches or, I don't know too many other places where the community kind of gathers, in certain communities, not every community, but certain communities where they kind of gather together. You're running into your neighbors at the laundromat a lot of times. So yeah, for sure. I love that side of things. And, where we are, we're in LA, LA's got a massive homeless problem and a big drug issue. And so that intersects with laundromats also. So there's also that side of it at the same time.
Yeah. So when you got started with the laundromats, what were the pitfalls?
Yeah. So, when I bought my first laundromat, it was, I really didn't know a whole lot. I talked to my wife's family friend, and I talked with the broker that I was working with trying to help me find a laundromat. And that was pretty much it. I didn't really know. And in fact, there really wasn't that many resources out there for people in the industry. And I basically relied on that broker who was selling me the business to help me get going. And the broker was not the best character, I guess, and just told me some outright lies that I had no idea.
He's got an objective,
Yeah,
right? Like his goal is to make a sale, and
yeah. And so I later came to find out after I'd already been punched in the gut by buying this laundromat that I thought was going to be making, a few $1,000 a month, and was really losing $1,500–$2,000 a month for like a year and a half. And I come to find out that this particular broker, is kind of their MO, and it's kind of what they do. And so, it is what it is. And, specifically some of the pitfalls, that I did was like, I didn't really do any due diligence at all, to verify the business. I mean, the broker told me, hey, look, we're going to come in and change things around and stuff. So it doesn't even make sense to do any due diligence because everything's going to be different. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But it is what it is. And then he told me kind of pie in the sky numbers, and I had no frame of reference to know whether he was telling me the truth or not. And so, I just took his word for it. And, he was selling the dream, right? The laundromat dream, is, hey, it's a passive business. All you got to do is come collect quarters once or twice a week. And that just turned out not to be the case, especially where my laundromats are. I mean, they're rougher neighborhoods. They're in South Central LA and right on the border of East LA, and they're just rougher neighborhoods. And so there was issues all the time, and there's, vandalism going on and people trying to camp out in the laundromat. And, you want to create a nice, clean, safe place for people to come do laundry. And that took a lot of work, a lot more work.
If it's not clean and safe, then it's going to deter other clients from even coming there to use your services or do their laundry.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, like the most common customer is like a mom, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe with or without kids. You either got a single woman going there, or you got a woman with her kids going there, by and large. And, you don't want the place to be filthy. You don't want homeless people hanging out. You don't want people feeling unsafe. And so, it took a lot of work to get it like that. And in the meantime, I was losing money every single month.
Yeah. So a lot of questions, because the industry in itself is so new to me, but how do you lose money? Because I was under the impression it's very passive. Like you were saying, I kind of think of it like, the vending machine industry, right? You stock it, you sit back and you wait for the quarters to fill up.
Yeah.
So what's the work behind it that you didn't know until you got into it?
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, one of the downsides, I guess, of laundromats is that they are capital intensive, both to get in and to run them. Okay. Right. I mean, you got rent to pay, you got your utility bills are, out of this world. They're super high usually because there's a lot of water going through that place and a lot of power and gas that, are running the machines, the dryers, the hot water heaters, all that stuff. Right. So, and labor obviously is super expensive too. And so you got a lot of expenses, to pay. And then, when I came in and I bought all new machines, then you have loan payments for the machines on top of all that. And, if you don't have a big enough customer base, to support that, then you're going to be losing money. And one of the things I realized was it was much easier to rehab the actual laundromat, like put new machines in, paint the walls, do new flooring, all that stuff, than it was to rehab the reputation of the laundromat. And that's what was proved to be very difficult because people saw it as this dark, dirty, cockroach infested place where homeless people hung out and it just wasn't safe. Right. And so just putting new machines in, it's not an, if you build it, they will come scenario. You got to do some marketing, but nobody told me that. I didn't know any of that. Right. So, so I wasn't able to build the customer base big enough, quick enough to not lose money.
So I caught that you said, one of your laundromats. So I take it that things turned around for you and you have more than one now. Is that correct?
Yes, but not in that order. Things were still going rough. I mean, they were trending in the right direction, but I was not making money. And another broker that I had met along the way brought me another deal. It was a seller financed deal with property here in LA. And, so I jumped at that opportunity, and I kind of saw it as, I had two routes to go, right? One route, I could say, hey, you know what? This didn't work. I tried something and I failed. I'm not making money. No harm in that, like no shame in that, but time to cut my losses and go find something else, right?
Yeah.
Or I could say, hey, you know what? I paid a lot of money to learn some very expensive lessons here. Maybe I should put them to use and go buy a second laundromat. And so I ended up going that route, which also did not go that great, by the way.
All right. Well, some of the same mistakes
over here.
Some of the same mistakes with the second one, or a different case?
No. I was like, okay, look, I've learned every mistake that there is. Like I've done them all with this first one, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure that I do not repeat those mistakes. And I didn't. However, the transaction was a little bit complicated on the seller side. They had like a divorce going on and stuff like that. So like paperwork was taking a long time. So the transaction took a long time. And what I didn't realize, and this was a new mistake, I hadn't made every mistake. Turns out there's plenty more mistakes.
Plenty more.
Yeah. But one of those that I didn't realize was there was a brand new, larger laundromat coming in, being built down the street. And, the broker knew about it, the seller knew about it, but I didn't know about it. And so, anyways, it basically opened almost to the day of when I took over that laundromat. So that was like an immediate, like 30 to 40% hit to the income of that laundromat.
Yeah, because it split the customer base right away.
Yeah.
And so how do you find out about something like that? Because you can do market research, but if the location is coming soon or isn't open yet, how do you even find out that it's coming? How do you prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And that's a question I sat dazed in, my office wondering, how would I even known that? So here's what I tell consulting clients now is two things you need to do. Number one is you need to go to like the city or county planning committee and go see if any permits have been pulled, for a new laundromat build. And usually that's going to look like some sort of plumbing, maybe some electrical stuff. But the plumbing is the big one. You need a big water line to come in to feed all those machines. So that, and then number two is I always say, hey, get out your Google Map app or your Apple Map app or your Thomas Guide or whatever, and drive up and down every single street within at least a mile. I mean, if you're in like a more urban area, if you're out further, you might need to go further, but go drive up and down every street in any kind of retail location where there's construction going, go poke your head in and see if that's going to be a laundromat. And check older laundromats too, and look for any signs of that they might be retooling, right? Adding new machines.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I didn't think about checking for the permits, but along those same lines, you might be able to look for, business license registrations or something like that too, to kind of help you find out, who's coming in the area. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right.
Another big mistake.
All right. Do you think you figured them all out yet? All the mistakes.
Well, what's funny is that, I'm just going to skip ahead just for a second. We can come back if you need to, but I learned all these mistakes, and then I started to find out all these people in this industry have made similar mistakes, right? And a lot of other people have struggled getting into the business and have struggled finding, resources and information on how to get in this business the right way. It's a cash business, so it can be difficult to pinpoint, how well the business is doing before you buy it. And so I was like, you know what? I've learned all these expensive lessons. Let me just put them out there so that, nobody else has to learn the lessons the way that I learned them. They can just learn them from me. Right. And so I started a little blog, and then I started a YouTube, and then I started a podcast, and those have grown like crazy. But, over the last couple of years, I've done a ton of, consulting calls. I did like a year and a half of free consulting calls, just to try to help people as much as I could until the demand was too much. I couldn't do all the free calls anymore. But all that to say, to answer your question, is I've seen thousands of deals now, and I've talked to hundreds of laundromat owners, and no, I have not seen all of the mistakes yet, because I continue to see new ones. I mean, there's a lot of themes, but there's new things that come up all the time.
So what's the goal with laundromats? Not necessarily for yourself, but anybody who's looking to get into that industry. How many do you need to scale to before you can actually get to that passive? And I know this probably depends on the area and that, but is there a common theme with, like, once you get to 2, once you get to 3, something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the answer to that question is always the same as every question, right? Depends on what your goals are and, all that. So, you can get financial freedom with one. I mean, there are laundromats that are making over 6 figures net, after all expenses. There's laundromats like that. And so you could get one if you needed to, depends on what you needed to be able to quit your job, or, work that fun part-time job, or whatever your goal is, right? You can do that with one. But then part of the beauty of laundromats is 1 or 2, maybe 3, and you could only have those and not have a job if you didn't want to. But you can also build it into a really big business, right? And so I just had a couple of brothers on my podcast who own more than 30 laundromats. I have a business partner who's got 13 laundromats and and a big pickup and delivery business also. And then there's people who, I had a guy on my podcast. He lives in southern Italy, and he owns a laundromat. He owns a couple little ones in Italy, and then he owns one in Florida. And so he uses it siding. So there's a lot of different ways that you can arrange this business. And what I always, tell people is, hey, take a look at your life and figure out, what do you want your life to look like? What are your goals? And, find out, number one, if laundromats can help you achieve whatever those goals are. If it's to leave your 9 to 5, if it's to retire early. I genuinely believe laundromats are one of the best ways to be able to build passive cash flow. I mean, I say passive, it's not totally passive. It's less passive than real estate even. But I mean, we're talking like maybe 5 hours a week, so hey, if you can leave your 9 to 5 and do 5 hours a week of laundromat stuff, then I'd say it's a pretty good trade-off. Right. I mean, if you're looking for cash flow, it's hard to beat laundromats. But you can also build it into a super big business if you want to. And there's lots of people doing that too. So it's pretty diverse, pretty flexible business, I think.
And so that's what you teach is, financial freedom through laundromats.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people that I talk to are either current laundromat owners who want to, get their laundromats performing better so that they can achieve whatever their goal is. If that's financial freedom, if that's, leaving their 9 to 5, that's just a side passive income to be able to reinvest into something else. A lot of people do that too. So, that's what I'm trying to help people do, or I'm trying to help people get into the business for the first time the right way and not make the mistakes that I made. Cause to be honest with you, it was super painful, super stressful, when I first got in the business. And I don't think anybody needs to experience that, getting in the first time.
Yeah, it's good that you're willing to provide people the shortcut. And that's, perfect for this podcast because success leaves clues. It's the point is for people to kind of look at the clues and the pitfalls that others have made. So hopefully, shorten their gap and their distance so they can be successful and not have to necessarily go through those same things.
Yeah, that's the goal, really. And that's honestly, that's why I started the podcast. So the blog that I did was just me spouting off my lessons, right? And the YouTube that I started with just me trying to teach the lessons I've learned, which is great. The podcast, though, is an interview. It's long form interview. It blows me away how many people listen to like an hour and a half long interview about laundromats. But, it just crossed 100 episodes and people are still listening. So
congrats, Jordan. What's the name of the podcast?
It's a Laundromat Resource Podcast. But that's an interview, and the whole goal there, it's similar vein. What you're trying to do is that whole success leaves clues. And that's just talking to other owners and saying, hey, what was your experience like getting in the business, and what are you doing now that's working that other laundromats owners can be doing in their laundromats to help them work? And what advice do you have for people trying to get in the business? And so that was the whole thing. And, kind of selfishly, I got to a point where I was like, well, shoot, I want to know what the best people in this business are doing, right? In this business and how they're running their businesses. Right. So if I start a podcast, I can just ask them and they'll just tell me, right? And then I can share it with other people, but really it's mostly just for me. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, so not only do you have all these different resources to help somebody, kind of bridge that gap, but now they can tap into your podcast and get continuing education, so to speak, right? And then be plugged in with people who are even your guests that can help them, be as successful as possible with their laundromat business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the goal of Laundromat Resource, like I debated making that like a personal brand thing. And I went with Laundromat Resource and made it not a personal brand because it doesn't need to be my voice. Like honestly, even now today, like I'm not the best laundromat owner out there. There's a lot of people doing it way better than me. And they have a lot to share, right? And so hearing from different voices, and like I mentioned too, there's a lot of different ways to do this business. There's a lot of different ways to find success in this business. And so having all these different voices sharing the different ways that they're running their businesses and what works and stuff, I think it's just been really awesome to hear all that. I really love it.
Yeah, it's definitely a great resource. How did your wife take it now that y'all are a little bit over those humps and the learning curve?
Yeah. I think she was a little bit scarred. She kind of, so we started off, we bought our first one and, we're like co-owners of that one. And she was like, I was like COO and she was like CFO kind of thing. And then we were losing money and she's like, I can't, it's too stressful for me. I can't be in charge of that. Right. And so I ended up taking over, it's not my skill set at all. Keeping things organized and paying the bills and all that stuff. And so I had my own learning curve to do there. But better now than it was for sure, but she still really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the laundromats.
Yeah. Is Hawaii still, on the roadmap?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that what's so funny, like I genuinely, like, despite our initial experiences, like I really believe like laundromats can be a great way to, depending on whatever your goals are, right? To leave your 9-to-5, all the things we talked about already.
Yeah.
I think they can be a great way to do that. But I also think that, they can help you get the things in life that you really want. And so, and that's part of what it is. Right. And I do think that there's a lot of really unique, great aspects about a laundromat business, but also it's just a vehicle, right? It's just a vehicle to either help you attain your financial goals and or to help you attain your humanitarian goals, right? Like you can do a lot of good with laundromats in the community.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's just one vehicle to do that. So all that to say, I think laundromats probably will help us get to Hawaii at some point. I mean, we talked about doing it this year, and we ended up not doing it. Maybe next year. I don't know. We'll see. Our kids are in unique phases right now. Our son next year will be starting junior high, and we're like, that's not a bad time to go to Hawaii. So in that transition phase, and so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
But that's why I asked you that, is because you kind of switched the timeline, but that doesn't mean the goal has to change, right?
Right.
So you were talking about going to Hawaii, but you started the laundromats, and that business, took a little while to get off the ground. But now that it's going well, I was just wondering if that goal can come back into play, and now you even have a passive income that can help you, fuel that dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, either we'll move over there for a little bit and see what it's like, or, she's a teacher, right? So we can spend an entire summer over there or whatever. I mean, we'll do something for sure.
Great. Yeah. Try it out. Well, I got something that I love to do on every episode. The name of the show is Success Leaves Clues Podcast. So I like to point out a couple of clues that I picked up during our conversation. And I'm quite sure the audience, will pick up their own things and probably even more than I caught myself. But one thing that I caught early on in the conversation is that your relationship with your wife. And sometimes you need a partner or somebody that can, see the outlook of something that you can't necessarily see, or they see it in a different way. So you had one particular goal in mind, and she said, you know what, we're going to start this business. And regardless of how difficult it was in the beginning, it's been, outstanding for you. It's changed the trajectory of your life, and it's continuing to grow. So it's great to have somebody like that on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing. Like, we have a lot of, frustrations because we think very differently. Right. And we have very different kind of mindsets even. But that does lead to some frustration, but it also is like, hey, she's looking at things that aren't even on my radar, and I'm looking at things that aren't even on her radar. And so as long as we can communicate well, I think that's that's kind of a superpower, right?
Yeah.
To think differently. So yeah,
absolutely. Another thing I noticed is, probably your faith, right? So you have a relationship with the Lord as a pastor, and that's one aspect. But entrepreneurship requires a lot of faith, right? There's a lot of things you can't see where it's going to go, how the outcome's going to be. And I think that is also another edge that you have, is to be able to say, look, I know how to, not rely on what I can see in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that has played a really, obviously it's been an integral role in my life, being a pastor for 15 years and all that. But I do see how that, I think one aspect of the faith is that, and especially being in pastoral ministry, is you get a little perspective, right? And it's like, yes, things are bad in our business right now, but in the grand scheme of things, we're okay. Like, everybody's good, and the same person's in charge. Who's in charge before, and he'll be in charge after too. So it does give us a little perspective that helps us take that leap and go buy a second one, despite our experience with our first one.
Absolutely. Look, I want to tell everybody, tune in to your podcast. I want them to check you out on, all your platforms, follow your blog, especially if they're looking at starting or already in the laundromat industry. I don't think there's anybody else better that they can follow, providing them that kind of information. That's why Jordan Berry is the king of laundromats.
I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate what you're doing too. I think it's huge to have just a platform where people can come to and congregate to try to help them figure out how to reach their goals, right? That's the whole point behind what you're doing is, finding those breadcrumbs that lead people to the success, whatever success looks like for them, right? And like you said, that success leaves clues. It leads those breadcrumbs that if we follow them, we can find our own success. So I appreciate that very much.
All right. Thanks a lot. I want to remind everybody out there, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Success Leaves Clues podcast.
Be sure to follow Dr. K on Instagram at Dr. K Washington or the podcast page at Success Leaves Clues Podcast. We'll see you here next time.